In Linux Essentials Lab 17, Ownership and Permissions, we are told that by performing this lab, we will learn how to set and view ownerships and permissions of files and directories. So we will be performing the view and understand permissions on files and directories. We will be using the chmod command to change permissions and change ownerships with the chown and chgrp commands. In 17.2 file permission, this introduced us to creating files and directories and viewing and setting their permissions. In this step, we will create two directories and two files in the /temp directory. So I'm going to clear what we have here, which is just the entry screen, and we are in our user folder, the main user folder, and we want to go to the /tmp directory. So we're just going to do cd for change directory, and then /tmp to go into our directory. We are going to use the mkdir or make directory command and create two directories called priv-dir and pub-dir respectively. So we are going to do mkdir, and this is just to make a directory, and then we're going to list the directories we want to make. And since we are in our /tmp directory, these directories will be inside of our /tmp directory. So we're going to type in our directories, which is priv directory, and then next we have pub directory. We press enter, we get no errors, so it looks like they were created. Now we want to create files into the directories we just made. We want to create a priv, or I think this means private. We want to make a priv or private file in our priv directory, and then we want to make a public file in our public directory. So to do this, we're going to use touch, and touch is used to make files. So we'll have touch, and then our directory, which is priv-dir, and then we have our slash, and then priv-file, because we want to be in our priv directory, and then we have our file name that we are creating. So this is the priv file, and we separate these with a /. Press enter here, that looks good. So now we're going to make a public file in our public directory. So we have a touch pub-dir, and then we have our slash to separate our new file, and then we have our pub-file. If we press enter here, this should be good. So now we are going to check file ownership, and we made our files in our directory, so now we have to check if they are there. We are going to do this by using the list command. So we have ls, and then we are following this with the option -l to list long. And we want to check our priv directory, so we'll do priv-dir. Pressing enter, we can see that we have a total 0, but we have our file inside of here. We can see that it is priv filed. We'll do the same thing where we check this, except instead of checking priv, we are going to check the public. So we'll change this to pub-dir. If we do this, we see that we have a public-file, so our file was created. We've gone over this before in an earlier chapter, however, it's good to refresh it, especially for this chapter. But we are going to look and examine all of these. These are permissions. They are 3 different types of permissions, and they're super important. Technically, these are the permissions, and this first character just describes the file name, and it tells us right here what the different characters could be and their meaning. So since we have just a dash like this, it looks like this, it means it is a regular file, which is great because all we did was create a regular file. Now we are told in the left side the group of characters. So the first group of 3 characters is the user's own permissions. So these 3 characters are the permissions of our user. The next 3 characters, which would be these, are the permissions of the group, and then the last 3 characters are the permission of the world, so any user. When we are viewing these permissions, R indicates the read permission, W indicates the write position, and X indicates the execute permission. Lastly, a dash character indicates that no permission has been granted for this slot, and it always goes from R, W to X. After this, we have our link counter, which is this number, and this indicates how many files are linked to this file. After this, we have the group. After this, we have the user owner, we have the group owner, we have the actual size of the file and the date and time it was created, and lastly, the file name. This is just review, but if we want to find hidden files, which are denoted with a dot or 2 dots for the parent directories, we would do a -a option with our ls. So we would do an ls, and we will also use a -l for long listing, and then an a for all hidden files. And if we press enter here, we can see that we have all of our files, which is a total of 16, and then our hidden files, which would be these two. These two are the hidden files, and they are root owned and group root owned. We can also see that we have our priv directory and pub directory here. In 17.2.4, we are told about the chmod command. So if we want to make a directory more private, we would use the chmod command to remove permissions that others have on our directory. So if we use the -d option with the ls command, it will list directory entities instead of contents. We'll try that out here. We'll do ls-ld, so ls long directory, which will list the directory entities, and then we want our directory that we're going to look at. So we are in /temp, and we want the private directory. So we will do priv-dir and then a /. If we press enter here, we get this information right here. And just going back, when we're comparing this to this here, we can see that it starts with something different, and this is because that this is a file, because it's a pub file, and this one starts with a D for a directory, and then also the permissions are changed. We noticed that too. So I cleared the command prompt just so we could focus on this. We're going to be focusing on this directory and removing permissions from the world right here. The world permissions, we are going to remove the read and execute permissions. To do this, we're going to use the chmod command, and then after this we need an O, and then a dash, where we need a space between them, and then our O and dash, and then after this is the permissions that we want to remove. The only permissions we have in here for the world are R and X, which is read and execute. So what we're going to do in here is remove the read and execute. So we're just going to type in R and X after our dash. And then after this, it's important to type the actual directory that we want to remove the permissions to. So we will have priv-dir and then /. If we do this, it looks like we did it. What we need to do is actually check the directory now. So we're going to do the same thing. We will just use the up arrow twice and list the directory, and we can see that our permissions are removed. We've gotten the same directory. We use the same exact script that we did up here. However, we got different permissions, and that is because we removed these permissions. And then we're given more information down here. We can use the chmod command to modify the permissions for others by using the O character, followed by either a plus or a minus character to add or subtract permissions. What this means is that if we had our O, so I'm going to hit the up arrow twice and bring this back. If we have our O, and then if we had a plus here, that means we would be adding these permissions. So what I will do actually as an example is add it back like this. And then if I were to list the directory, we can see that the permissions are back. That's because I have a plus, which means it adds those permissions back. We can even have an equal sign, and this character can be used to set exact permissions. We can also use a U character instead of the O character to modify permissions of the user owner, and then we can also use the G character to change permissions of the group owner. We have to note that the first 3 characters after our file type or our type is going to be the user. The 3 characters after this is going to be the group, and then the 3 characters after this is going to be the world. This is using the octal method, and this relies on a binary translation of an octal base 8 number. To modify everyone's permission, instead of using a O, U, or G, we're going to use a character, and this modifies all of the permissions. We're also given examples down here as well to look at.
In 17.2.5, step 5,
if we want to make a directory more public, we need to use the chmod command and add write permissions for others. It's going to be exactly the same as what we did up here with the chmod o rx, except we are going to be adding a privilege. We are going to be adding the write privilege. We can see that we are missing that in here, but we are going to do that with the public directory instead of the private directory. So what we're going to do is first list and see our public directory. We'll do ls-ld, so list long directory, that way we can see the directory in its full form, and then we're going to list the actual directory, which is public-directory, and then our /. If we press enter here, we can see our directory. Now we want to modify it. We can see that we are missing a W in our global permission right here. So what we want to do is write this W in. We want to allow this permission. So we're going to do the chmod command. We're going to do our O, and then we're going to do a plus since we are adding a permission. Then we have a W and then our directory, which is pub-dir, and then a /. If we press enter here, we have no errors, which means we probably successfully did this. But we should always check this by doing a ls, so list-ld, list directory, or I'm sorry, long directory, and then we'll do pub-dir and then a /. The color change doesn't really matter. It looks like it's the same exact directory, but if we look at our permissions, we can see that we have added the write permission. So now our global users can write, and that's what we wanted to do. We've added a permission.
In 17.2.6, step 6,
we are going to be using the chmod command to remove any permissions from the group and others of the priv file. So what we need to do is first list our file to make sure we actually have the file. Then we're going to change it and then list it again to see that we have all of the permissions are removed from groups and our world users or others. So listing this first, we're going to do an ls-l. We're not going to do an ld because we're not listing the directory, we're listing a file. And then we're going to have our directory, so priv-dir /priv-file. And then once we do that and press enter, we can see that we have this information right here. We need the ls and the l to list it, and then we need the directory and then file of that directory. So basically the file path. We have these permissions right here, and we want to remove the group and world permissions. So when we are done with this, we should just have slashes across them, or I'm sorry, dashes across them, indicating that there are no permissions. So to do this, we're going to use the chmod command, and then in our chmod command, we're going to do a G for group, and then we're going to do an O for others. So we'll do a G, we'll do a dash, and then the dash is actually representing a subtraction. So we're really doing G subtraction RW. So we're subtracting the read and write permissions from our group. Then we can do a comma to do for others. So we'll do O for others. We'll do a subtract because we were subtracting and our only permission here is read. So we're going to take off the read, and then we need the file path. The file path is priv-dir /priv-file. If we press enter here, we can see that for some reason it's invalid. It's saying that I have an invalid mode G-RW, and I think it's because I have a space after this. So I'm just going to delete that space. It looks like the space was the issue here, so there should not be a space after the comma. It just goes straight into the next part. So we're going to relist this by doing a ls-l and then a priv-dir /priv-file, and again this is the file path. So if I press enter here, we can see that we have removed permissions for the group and other users.
In 17.2.7, step 7,
we are going to grant all users the same read and write permissions for the public file. So we made the private file really private, only for the actual user. And now we want to make the public file read and writable for all users. So first we're going to do the same thing where we list it, we give the different permissions, and then we list it again to see that we did it correctly. So first listing this, we're going to do an ls, which is a list, -l for long, and then our file path. If we press enter here, we are going to get the permissions, and we're looking at this here. We want to make it read and writable for everybody. So we're just going to change the other permissions. We'll have a chmod, and since we want to cover all of our bases, instead of just doing for others, we're going to do all, because we want to grant everyone the same permission. So for doing all, we're going to have an A, we'll have a equals, and then a RW. So we're basically giving all of our members the read and write permission. And then we're going to do our file path, pub-file. If we press enter here, no errors, so this looks good. We are then going to relist this by doing ls-l for long, and then our file path. Pressing enter here, we can see that everyone has the read and write permissions, so we did that correctly.
In 17.2.8, step 8, execute permissions are required for users to run executable files.
We are going to create a test.sh file in the /temp containing the content date as a string. So we're going to use the echo command, and then we are going to have our string, which is date, and then we are going to move this. So we're going to use the arrow key. Again, a callback to a previous lab that we did, which is in our playlist, and then we're going to have test.sh. If we press enter here, no errors, so our file has been created. And then we are given more context down here, where if a file contains commands, then those commands can be run or executed only if the file has execute permission for the user. The process of making a file into an executable file requires giving the execute permission on the file. Without the permission, the file cannot be treated as a program. This is basically saying that unless we have an X here as our permission, then we cannot run this file. We are going to attempt to execute this file by using a dot, and then our file, which is /test.sh, and the reason why we are doing a dot is because this is our directory, and then if we press enter here, we see that we have a permission denied. We can see why we have a permission denied if we do our ls-l and then our file name, which is test.sh. If we press enter here, we can see we have no executable permission. Only the user owner of a file or root user is allowed to change permissions on a file. So since we are the user owner of this file because we just made it, we are going to give ourselves the permission to execute it. We are going to use the chmod command to add this. So we can see that our user does not have the power to execute this, so we're going to use a u plus x, and this is only going to give the power to execute to the user, and then our file name, which is test.sh. Pressing enter, no errors, so we're going to do an ls-l test.sh, and this is going to list this, and we can see that we now have an x in here, meaning we can now execute this. So if we do /test.sh and press enter, we can see that we can execute this, and it gives us the date. Down below our example, we are told that we can use the chmod command with numbers instead of symbols. So far we've only used symbolic notation. Now we're going to look at numeric notation. So it works either way. The chmod command with octal notation is important to know though, and we must first understand the octal value of the permissions. So a read is a 4, a write is a W, and this is 2, and an execute X is 1. These are the numeric versions of a read, write, and execute. The reason why they're numeric is because a total is calculated for each ownership. As a result, the user's permissions total to be calculated as 7, because we have a read, write, and execute, meaning 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. If the group's permission total will be a 4 plus 2 or a 6, where 4 is for the read permission and 2 is for the write position, then we know that we can only read and write. So the addition of this and the specific addition of these things being totally different from each other means that the system can actually tell based on the sum of the numbers what permissions are allowed and what permissions are not allowed. We have this 3-digit number right here, and what this represents is the user permission, the group permission as a 6, and then lastly the other permission as this 4 right here. So for the user, we have a 7 right here, and that's because we have read, write, and execute, which is 4 plus 2 plus 1. Next we have this 6, and the 6 is we have an R and a W, which is 4 plus 2, which is why it's 6. And then lastly, since we can only read for the others, we're just going to have a 4 in here, which is why it is a 4. In 17.2.11, step 11, we are told that the stat command displays more detailed information about a file, including providing the group ownership both by group name and GID. We use the stat command to verify the octal value of our permissions access to the test.sh. So if we do stat test.sh, which is our file, syntax is stat and then the file name, and press enter, we can see this information about it. The permissions are listed in the accesses, which is right here. If we want to change the permissions using octal notation to give the group and others execute permissions, then we would choose the following 3 numbers. A 7, which means read, write, and execute. A 7 for the group owner, which is read, write, and execute, and then 5, which is read and execute for others. The new mode or octal number for the permissions would then be 7, 7, and 5. In 17.2.12, using octal notation, we are going to modify the test.sh file. So everyone will be able to execute this file. We are going to use the chmod command, but instead of using the symbolic notation, we are going to be using the octal notation. So we'll use a chmod and then our 775, which is read, write, execute for both the user and the group, and then the 5 being just read and execute for everyone else. We're going to do our file name and then press enter. Once we have this, we're just going to list this to make sure we did this correctly, and after we list this, we can see that we have given everyone the permission to execute. In 17.3, file ownership, we are going to view and change the ownership of files and directories. In 17.3.1 step 1, we are told that there are only 2 commands that can affect the ownership of files, these being the change ownership command and the change group command. The change ownership command can only be executed by the root user, and it can change both the user and group that owns a file. The change group command can be used by either the user who owns a file or by the root user. The change group command only affects the group that owns a file. When a non-root user uses the change group command, they can only change the group ownership to a group of which they are a member, so they can only inflict change on their specific group. The root user, on the other hand, can use the change group command to change the group ownership of any file to any group, so it can move it outside of that group if it wanted to. So for the rest of this problem, what we're going to have to do is go from our /temp directory into a su. So we're going to go into the root user. We'll just do su and press enter. We have to enter the password, which for this lab is net lab123. Press enter here. We are now in the root localhost directory. This kicked us out of our /temp directory, but we want to go back into it, so we're just going to change directory back into tmp. If we want to see our public directory, we'll do ls-ld. So this is list long directory public directory, which is our file directory. When we do that, we see that we get this right here. If we want to list the file inside of here, we'll do ls-l for list long, and then our pub directory, and then our pub file. Enter here, we get this for our file. We're going to use the change ownership command to change the user and group owner of pub directory to the root user and the root group. Then we're going to view the details. So currently, if we look at our pub directory and our pub file, we can see that the user is system admin and the group is system admin for both of these. This is where the user and group is, and now we're going to change it to the root user. So to do this, we're going to change ownership, or chown, to the root. We'll do a colon root and then pub-dir. We're using the change ownership here, and then we have our user, and then we have our group, and then we have our directory right here. No errors, looks good. We're going to check this by doing ls-ld pub-dir, so we're just basically listing this long directory. If we press enter here, we can see that now the root is the owner and group owner for this file. In this next part, we're going to use the change ownership command to change the owner of the public file to the bin user. So not this directory that we just did, but the file inside of our directory. So what we're going to do is something very similar to like this. We're going to use the change ownership, just like we did up here, and then we need our user, which will be bin instead of root here. We don't need a colon or a group since we're not changing the group, but we do need the file directory. Since we're not just using the directory, we actually need the file path. So we're going to list the directory and then the actual path and then the actual file to complete our path. We've done this correctly, and now we could just list this doing an ls-l and then our file path, and this will show us that we have changed the user for our file, and we have changed the user owner for our file, but we have not changed the group for it. Next, if we want to view the details of priv-dir and its contents, we'll just list this out by doing an ls-ld priv-dir, and this lists the directory for it. This is different from what we did up here because we changed the public directory. So our private directory is still our sysadmin, while our public directory is root user. That could be a little bit confusing, but this is our public that we changed, and this is our private that we have not changed. So we're going to list the file in here as well. We'll do ls-l and then our file path, which is priv-dir-priv file. And we can see the information about our file right here. Last part of this lab, we are in 17.3.6, and we are going to change the group ownership of all of the files of a directory structure using the recursive -uppercase R option to the change group command. We're going to change the group ownership of the priv directory and priv file to the user's group recursively with the change group command and view updated files. So first we're going to list our priv directory. We'll do ls-ld. Before we do this, I'm just going to clear the console to make it a little bit cleaner. Then we're going to do ls-ld and then our priv dir. Pressing enter here, this is what we get for now. Now we want to actually list the file, so we'll do ls-l and then our file path. Press enter here, this is what we have for our file. Now we want to change it, so we'll do a change group, because we're changing the group. We're doing -r, that way we can change the group ownership of all files of our directory, and then we are going to have our directory. So we're going to have this as our user, and then we're going to have who we're changing it to, which is our user. So we'll do users here, and this is who we're giving it to. Now we need the actual directory. So we'll have priv-dir. Enter here, and then check this by doing ls-ld to list the directory, and then priv-dir. We can see that now the group is users. We've changed the group with the change group command right here to users. And since we use the recursive R, that means we should have also changed the group of anything in our priv directory. So we can check our file, the priv-file, by doing ls-l, priv-dir, and priv-file. And then if I spell this correctly, we can see that our group for this is now users as well. Both of these used to be system admin, and now they are users. So that is the end of Lab 17, ownership and permissions. If this video helped you, please do me a favor and like it. It would really make my day, and I hope you have a good one.